Well, I'm back with you to talk to you about how to do the impossible task. You know, God's a God of impossible tasks. He loves that kind of thing. I mean, he sent a little boy, young man, a teenager. I don't know, I think he was probably about 20 years of age, but he sent David to kill a giant. He sent Noah to build an ark and save the world. God's been about doing impossible things all through the scriptures. That's just who he is and what he does. And so when he tells us to evangelize the world in our generation, we kind of freak out. We're like, hey, we can't do that. Well, let me show you something. We think it's impossible for one person or one church to reach the world. But if we were to continue doing what he told us to do, we could get it done. So I'd like to give you an example of another impossible task and how it came about. In Genesis chapter 1, verses 27 and 28, God has now created Adam and Eve. And he looks at these two people and he says, be fruitful, multiply, and replenish the earth. I want you two to leave here, go have a bunch of babies. I want you to multiply. Don't add. 2 and 2, no, 2 and 20. Multiply and replenish. Fill up this earth and subdue it and be in charge of it. Now, the truth is, Adam and Eve didn't leave there going, oh, that doesn't make a lick of sense. How could that happen? That's not possible. They didn't do that. Pastors do that and missionaries do that because we kind of think, well, you know, the Great Commission's different. And really not a lot different than this. See, they could have never replenished the earth by reproducing themselves. There was no way Adam and Eve could have enough kids to fill up the world. You know that. But see, if you took 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2, that would totally change the story now, wouldn't it? If you could find others who could hear the same truths and know the same truths, you could teach them how to do it, and they could find others to do it, and we could all get involved in doing that, we could literally fill the world. And they did. By the time the flood happened, one Bible commentator I read recently said the world had 7 or 8 billion people living on it already. I don't know. They've done the calculations. But the world was full of people. And there are skeletons all over the world from people who died and the flood took them. And so I'd say to you that they went to work and they had a lot of kids and it happened. I know they lived hundreds of years, but living hundreds of years wouldn't have helped them have a family. But what they could do was raise a family that could have a family and raise a family. Mom and dad could have kids, the kids could get married, the kids could have a family, their kids could get married and have a family. People are living 900 years. It wouldn't take long for families to multiply and grow. You know, Betty and I married in 1973, August the 18th of 1973. It was just two little skinny people, very young. I was 3 days before turning 19. Betty was 19. And it was two of us. It was just us two against the world. It was wonderful days. I've had a blast with her. We'll celebrate our 50th anniversary later this year. And then 2 years later, we had a child, a son. And then over the next few years, we had 4 children, and now there were 6 of us. Those 4 children grew up and they all got married, and now there were 10 of us. Then they started having children. And then so now there were 20 grandchildren, and 8 on the children's level, so that's 28. And then Betty and I, that's 30. Then 2 grandchildren have now gotten married. That's 32. And then one of our grandchildren is, 2 more of our grandchildren are looking like they may get married. And then one of our grandchildren is going to have a baby. We're going to be great grandparents. This thing is multiplying and fast. We're only 68 years old. Adam and Eve had a lot more children than just the 4. They had a whole lot more time, and the world was populated, filled. Now, Jesus gave us the model, didn't he? Jesus showed us that it wasn't about preaching to the big crowds, it was about training the 12 men. But pastors today are more interested in training and preaching to the big crowds than they are training the 12 men. And there's a dilemma, because it's more fun to be in a pulpit preaching to big crowds than it is training the men to do the ministry. So we dedicate ourselves to doing ministry, not reproducing ourselves. So you want to keep doing the ministry. Without a doubt, you got to keep doing the ministry, but you got to reproduce yourself. So what if every pastor in his lifetime could train 30, 60, or 100 pastors? Men that would be pastors or missionaries or full-time Christian work. And then they were to train 30, 60, or 100 more. And then they were to train 30, 60, or 100 more. It would snowball. There would be churches popping up everywhere. We can see this done. I challenge you to consider the training of men.